All right, on to question number 4. Before I go ahead and announce this question, I would like to remind the chat our last question that we answer is a chat submitted question. So go ahead and drop your questions below, and we will have one of those selected as the last question for today. On to the next question. Are you up or down about Airbnbs? And Chris Jefferson, you are up first, sir.
I'm way down on Airbnbs. I don't like Airbnb. I don't think it's a sustainable business. I think it's a hustle and a cash grab because there's too many variables at the end of the day when it comes to Airbnb. It's a buzzword right now. Everybody's saying STR, short-term rental this, short-term rental that. The reality of it is the Airbnb business is essentially the hospitality business. We need to be aware of that, where we're at in terms of the economy currently, where we see the economy going. And we can just go back and see over history that the hospitality industry will go down. So all these, Airbnbs that people are picking up on leases and getting business credit cards to try to pick these things up to furnish them. I think people are going to have a really hard time in the very near future. I think there's people that do short-term rentals very correctly, where they own the real estate. They've analyzed it in a way where it functions in different exit strategies. But if you're somebody chasing Airbnb and have multiple leases in multiple states and you can't make those payments, I don't like it. I think it's a tough business to want to be in right now.
All right. Next up, Leon Barnes.
I'm indifferent on this one, and here's why. It's not a strategy that I utilize myself. It's something that I have the luxury of being around 300 elite real estate investors on a daily and annual basis. And I know some of them that are crushing in Airbnb, and I know others that won't touch it, like CJ just mentioned. I think it's one of those strategies that if it works in your market, and some markets work better than others, and surprisingly, some of the best markets I've heard recently from some of those investors are in the Midwest. So for me personally, I'm indifferent on it. There are some people that are really, really good at it. I would just, to Chris's point, it is a different business, and people get into it just like I sometimes think people get into apartments and go, well, that's my next phase. It not necessarily doesn't have to be the next phase. So for me personally, I'm indifferent on Airbnb.
Okay. Steve Trang, your thoughts?
So I want to be clear that Leon had no position on that. So for sure, that should be 0 points. Definitely. So I think if you look at every recession, which we're not necessarily in a recession, but has all the signs of it, right? Is there's 2 things that go down in every recession: tourism and cosmetic surgery. Like those are the 2 industries that always get hurt, right? So I want nothing to do with that right now. I have 0 interest in doing Airbnbs. I don't have any Airbnbs, and again, like a few other things, I've left money on the table. I know it, but I just never had faith in it because that was the one that is very sensitive to the economy. So if I was gonna do it, I would have to be like, where the property's touching the water or something where you got to be like killing it with excellence in that arena. Otherwise, I would want nothing to do with Airbnb.
So you just are indifferent as well.
I want nothing to do with it. I'm down on it.
Well, let's close it up with Eric Brewer.
I'm intrigued by the concept. Like I watch all these videos and TikToks and Instagram posts of these people putting up their numbers. I'm concerned about the longevity. I think to Chris's point, it's a different business. Certainly the acquisition and renovation of that particular house fits in alignment with what we've always done, but the management of that, the fees associated, and then I'm just really worried about how legislation will impact it, right? Like we've seen how they've really compressed the areas that it's permitted in. I think if you buy a house and it makes sense as a long-term hold and you optimize by making it a short-term rental, that's a great philosophy. But what I wouldn't want you to do is count on $6,000 worth of short-term rental income for a house that would rent for $1,500 if that legislation or something changed about tourism. So buy it as a long-term hold, maximize it as a short-term rental. I think that's a good combo, but I'm generally out. I might buy 1 or 2, but I'm not going all in.
Okay, floor is open. If you guys have anything else to add while we tally up the votes.
Yeah, I mean, how many Airbnb units can the market sustain? You've got where people are taking over entire apartment complexes, turn them into short-term rentals. You got where people are trying to online all these units across the country for Airbnb. What happens when legislation changes? What happens when again it gets regulated? What happens when tourism and hospitality is down? It's just a tough business, in my opinion, to try to be in and plan against for the future in terms of cash flow. So again, to me, it's a hustle and a cash grab. I'm like Steve. I've left money on the table with it, I'm sure, but I like predictable, consistent business, and I don't see that with Airbnb at all.
There's all of us.
There's no. It's been around for 10 years. We don't have 20 years of reference to make decisions about how it'll be impacted. The reality is we don't know. Everything that we're guessing about what happens with legislation and hospitality and tourism could be completely different than what actually happens. It's a gamble. And for me, I got into real estate not because it was gamble, it's because it was as close to a sure thing as I could find. So to me, real estate's a sure thing. Airbnb is not. It's a startup.
So ask this question. How many of you guys on this call, how many investors, elite investors, do you know that 100% of their business is Airbnb?
Well, I think the problem, hold on, Leon. So here's the problem with that question, right? It's not the elite investors, I think, that's the concern. I think it's the average person that's being taught arbitrage and they see it as a low cost, low way to get into the business. And so they go out and get business credit cards. They go out and sign leases on multiple properties. And that's all good when it works.
But that's my point.
Yeah. So
we don't know a lot of elite people that are doing it full time. That's a really good strategy.
But people don't know that though, because we're in this marketing information age, social media age, where they're just seeing what they see on reels. They're just seeing what they see in ads. And people right now, right today, right in the, Steve says we're not in a recession. I think we are in a recession. It just hasn't officially been declared. But you have people literally right now that are saying, hey, go arbitrage Airbnb.
So here's what always happens, right? Like you bought it as a flip. It didn't work out. I'm going to keep it as a rental. Or you try to sell it as like, this is going to be a great rental property. Now, and then it turns into, well, this is going to be a great group home. This is going to be a great sober living home. Now it's like, this is a great Airbnb. Like it's just all these different degrees of how they have to pitch it to sell the property.
Right. I think it can be a great strategy as a bolt-on, as an additional,
for diversification.
Strategy to monetize. But to Eric's point earlier, if you're buying it and it only works as an Airbnb, I would reconsider that.
Solid.
Now, I will say this. You guys all made great points, but there was a little bit of a letdown because I heard no one bring up the fact that Airbnb house pool parties in the Phoenix market are all the rage right now. And I'm not saying I'm speaking from experience, you don't want them, but they do pretty good.
They do pretty good. That's what I had for my 40th birthday. We rented out an Airbnb, went crazy with it, but they just passed this rule. I think at Airbnb, no more house parties.
Yeah. That's the quickest way they could tank their company. All right. It looks like Chris Jefferson took that round also.
Whoa!
We've got a
He's even surprised. Right, he's even surprised he took that one.
No. I think.
Wow!
I can't believe I won.
It was such a great take. I just thought I'd win by a bigger percentage. That's all.
Sure.